right, just around the corner. I was eagerly waiting for you. Hello, good morning, and many thanks indeed for joining us today in the market here on AM Live, where we shall be looking at the state of the economy, how it has been performing since, of course, the beginning of this year, and corruption also being smack dab in the middle. We have with us Patrick Obath, who will also be joined by other panelists much later in the course of the program. But good to see you. Early morning.
Yeah.
You're an early riser.
Yes, this is my normal time.
So I presume today you didn't make it for your gym because I already did.
No, I didn't go to the gym this morning. Yeah, I came here instead.
Fantastic. But today, that will be our focus today in the market, looking at the state of the economy. It's just a broad overview of what is happening currently. But for you, what is the overarching thing that you think this is where we should train our focus as a country?
For me, it is one of the big four agenda, which is basically agriculture. Let's get it right. Because one, it will bring dignity to lives in the country. Look at what is happening to Turkana at the moment. That is not a dignified life.
Yes.
And in other parts of the country, there are people suffering. If we do that right and get the agriculture working, then the sort of value addition chain will also begin to work and you begin to add value. And that will then effectively create an opportunity for an export market in terms of manufacturing. So it will support some of the other aspects of the Big Four agenda.
Right.
But I think getting agriculture right will be a very, very big stimulus. And if we can focus purely on that and nothing else, I think we'll do good for this country.
All right. And of course, we shall be joined also by Peter Biwott, who is the CEO of Export Promotion Council in Kenya, to tell us what really is on the export market as far as our country is concerned.
Right.
And we know that agriculture has been a big, cog in this wheel of the economy, but that seems to be tapering off. So do we need to diversify our portfolio?
I think we just need to move away from the traditional agricultural, horticultural, floriculture area and go more into the consumption area. I mean, the big crops that we grow in Kenya should be grown everywhere and then be commercialized and exported.
Yes.
Right? I mean, maize we eat as a staple. That can be commercialized into other things. If you look at the things like peas, all this stuff, right? We can really grow those to scale such that we are net exporters of processed agricultural material.
Right.
And at the moment, we're importing a lot of stuff into Kenya. And we are just part of a small market for some very large manufacturers globally. So we need to turn that trend and not think about manufacturing for Kenya, but manufacturing for the world. That's where we need to go. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. Make sure you join us much later in the course of the program for that engaging discussion that we shall be having here in the market today, looking at the state of the economy. But before we get around deeper with that, let's look at the good, the bad, and the ugly in our dailies today. Beginning with the Daily Nation, this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation. Top judges in fight of a lifetime. Standing accused as 6 out of 7 judges of the highest court in the land, including its president and Chief Justice David Maraga. Should the Judicial Service Commission find them guilty, it will recommend a tribunal. And hear the story on page 6 of the Daily Nation today, and some of the faces of the judges in trouble. Chief Justice David Maraga, petitioner, makes several accusations ranging from tribalism to attending rallies. Also, Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu, she is battling the constitutionality of charging a sitting judge. We have Justice Njoki Ndongo, accused of improper contact with agents of governor with intention of receiving bribe. Justice Mohammed Ibrahim, accused of improper contact with agents of governor with intention of receiving bribe. Justice Mokin Wanjala, accused of improper contact with agents of governor with intention of receiving bribe. In trouble. The decision by the JSC to recommend the formation of a tribunal to try Justice Jackton Ojwang is a result of just one of several petitions filed against 6 Supreme Court judges. Why? JSC to be satisfied by all pending allegations, the court will be left with only one judge. That is Justice Isaac Lenaola. And this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation. This story, you have the full scope of it on page 6 of today's Daily Nation. And you can see on top there also the flagger reading Justice Jackton Ojwang to face tribunal. We can also see a related picture here on the front page of the Daily Nation. And now fake gold found in bank safe. Police raid at Barclays Bank branch and unearths fake gold believed to belong to a suspect in the 2 billion shillings in fake currency found in a vault on Tuesday. How the criminals managed to store their fake currency and gold within the premises of a bank of international repute is a question detectives are seeking to answer. And this is a story on page 4 of the Daily Nation today. Also, imagine world without king of a jungle, then imagine no more, because experts have warned that in just 20 years, the lion could be extinct in Kenya thanks to corruption. That story is tucked away on page 3 of the Daily Nation this morning. The Standard is up. Justice on trial is what is a splash today. Justice Jackton Ojwang to face tribunal following allegations of graft. Some Supreme Court judges fighting serious accusations. In total, 61 complaints against judges, 175 targets magistrates, 6 petitions against top judges, some bribery claims filed in the past 2 weeks. This story continues on page 6 of the Standard this morning. Also, 900 million shillings life cover boost for civil servants. National Hospital Insurance Fund cleared to sign insurance cover deal for civil servants and police after case challenging award is dismissed. This story is tucked away on page 8 of the Standard today, and the job groups are here as well. On the far left corner of the Standard, or on the far right corner of the Standard, whichever way you're looking at it, this is what is on the front page of the Standard today. Also, government trade test. Right. This is about Anita. I think there is an advertisement. But let's see what we have on the front page of the Star. And this is what we have on the front page of the Star. DCI probes missing 5.6 billion shillings e-citizen cash. This is another scandal. Kinoti wants to know where money collected from Kenyans has disappeared. Private company set up a pay bill number linked to the platform and collected the funds. This story is tucked away on page 4 and 5 of today's Star. And Ruto, the graft fight targets me, he says. Deputy President William Ruto yesterday said he is being targeted in the war on corruption that he said has degenerated into impunity. He said at a conference in Mombasa that there is an attempt to paint him in a bad light for political reasons. He made the remark as he opened the first Inter-Professional Summit, and this story is tucked away on page 2 of the Star this morning. And here also is a standalone picture. Not really a standalone picture, but a related picture to that story, where we can see Deputy President William Ruto arriving at the opening of the first Inter-Professional Summit in Shanzu, Mombasa County. You can follow this story, as I've mentioned, on page 2 of the Star this morning. The People Daily up next, and this is a splash. Why Ojwang goose is cooked, I should say. JSC writes to President to form tribunal to probe Supreme Court judge described by colleagues as a consummate legal scholar over integrity deficit claims, with 13 others, including Chief Justice Maraga, facing damning petitions. This story continues on page 4 and 5 of the People Daily today. And also on top there, cops raid sees fake gold in bank after finding 2 billion shillings counterfeit cash on Tuesday. Police intensify hunt for wash lords. You follow the story on page 6 of the People Daily this morning. Let's see what also Taifa is holding for us today. Hali Neshwari, this is what he is saying. That is Deputy President Ruto. Wamalo wakana watu wamekufa kwa njaa. Madaktari wasema kuna haja ya kiini cha vifo kutambuliwa. That story also continues on page 2 of Taifa Leo this morning. Also, tume yataka huru abuni jopo la kungoa Jaji Ojwang wadhifa. And this story continues on page 3 of Taifa Leo. Business Daily up next, and this is what you're waking up to. Linturi are caught in battle over 2 billion shillings NTSA cash. Prominent politicians in high-stakes fight for proceeds of digital licenses tender. A web of companies associated with Meru Senator Mithika Linturi and former presidential candidate Ekuru Aukot are locked in a battle for the proceeds of 2.1 billion shillings contract for the supply of digital driving licenses. This story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Also, Adede, man at the center of 2 billion shillings fake Barclays Bank cash probe. His story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily. Rent circle rounds dominate tribunal hearings. More Kenyans turning to tribunals to resolve rent disputes with their landlords. A new report by the judiciary has showed disputes over rent payments and the operations of savings and credit cooperative societies formed the highest number of cases filed with tribunals in Kenya. The judiciary performance report for last year shows. You can follow the story also on page 4 of the Business Daily. And there's a standalone picture here. We can see pupils from Mathare Primary School attending the World Oral Health Day celebrations at Mathare National Teaching and Referral Hospital yesterday. The day highlights the importance of oral hygiene. That is what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Also on the ticker, corrupt set to pay back twice. Individuals convicted of corruption will be imprisoned for more than 10 years, fined more than 1 million shillings and compelled to pay back twice the amount of benefit or loss they occasion if MPs approve a bill that is an anti-corruption and economic crime amendment, which is being amended, and that is the legislator Nyoro who is trying to do that. You can follow that story on page 5 of the Business Daily. Safaricom finds locals in Mombasa over base setup is another story that you want to follow also inside the Business Daily this morning. Let's cross borders now. We go to Tanzania. Tanzania gets 121 billion shillings capital boost for Bank M takeover. Tanzania Bank shareholders have raised some 120.5 billion shillings in additional capital to boost liquidity after the Bank of Tanzania okayed the lender's acquisition of Bank M Tanzania. This story continues on page 2 of the Citizen this morning. And 800 billion shillings the value in shillings of Bank's M's total assets and liabilities transferred to Azania Bank by Bank of Tanzania. Also, lessons for TZ in attaining middle-income economy. You can follow this story on page 2. We can see also Bungo interchange starts to take shape. This is how it looks. It's a standalone picture, but the story continues also inside the Citizen in Tanzania. 1 trillion shillings India loan to finance water supply projects. That story tucked away on page 2. Mwananchi is up next, still in Tanzania. Kibunga cha kimbiza mvua nchini nje balaa. That is what we have here. Kibunga cha kimbiza mvua nchini nje balaa. And you can see the devastation. TMA yasema baadhi ya maeneo yatakuwa na uhaba. Waziri wa kilimo atoa ushauri. And you can follow this story also on page 4 of the Mwananchi today. Speaker AG wapewa siku 7 kesi ya Nasari is another story also that is tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Not Business Daily, but Mwananchi in Tanzania. Let's see what we have on the front page of Daily Monitor. In Uganda, relief as Isimba Dam switches on 183 megawatts. China's Export-Import Bank largely bankrolled construction of a 2 trillion shillings plant with Uganda covering 15% of the cost. Uganda now has electricity capacity of 1,000 megawatts. This is a special report that you can follow on page 8 and 9 of the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. Also, Night Kulabako at 71, Mama UPC lived and saw it all. You can follow her story on page 2 also of the Daily Monitor. NRM retreat ends with 10 resolutions, and you can see here President Museveni brandishing an AK-47 rifle after a shooting range exercise yesterday. The president also closed the week-long NRM caucus retreat at the National Leadership Institute in Kiakwanzi. You can follow the story on page 5 of the Daily Monitor if you're waking up in Uganda. State House unit arrests leader Diso. Government now softens on land acquisition law. EC transfers all districts registrars. That story continues on page 5 of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. In Rwanda, key issues residents want tackled in city master plan is a splash today. And we can see also Kagame in Angola for working visits. He's seen here with the President Lourenco in Luanda yesterday. The head of state are expected. The heads of state are expected to strengthen bilateral cooperation between the two countries in existing areas of partnerships, including air transport, security and justice. We have migration as well, ICT and governance. Also, Senate 6 Expedition of Food and Drugs Authority is on page 8 of the New Times if you're waking up in Rwanda. Let's continue to see also what we do have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Of course, this is the latest to us. The time zone notwithstanding, we can see Trump hosting Brazil's new leader and calls for deeper ties. Right, this is Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who visited the White House on Tuesday in his first meeting with President Trump, who said he plans to designate Brazil as a major non-NATO ally. The two leaders exchanged jerseys from their national soccer teams. And you can follow this story on page 7 of the Wall Street Journal. Biden tells backers he plans a 2020 run, drums up cash. And that story also on page 4. Also, China-US set for next round of talks. Officials plan to meet in Beijing to resume negotiations on trade, hoping for deal in April. That is what we have inside the Wall Street Journal as well. Also, Venezuela's poor. A Maduro power base turn on regime is another story that you want to follow also inside the Wall Street Journal this morning. Lastly, let's see what we have also as editorial cartoons today. This is what has been drawn by Victor in the Star. Chief who revealed starvation debts sacked. This is the Jubilee administration, and you can see truthful while drunk. That is the offense, and I'll leave it for you to decipher this. That is what Victor has drawn for us inside the Star. And here is what is in the Daily Nation today, right? Just the war on graft and the DCI is really pumping it, and this balloon is getting bigger and bigger. I'll leave it for you to decipher that as well, what Monene has drawn for us. This is what we have in the People Daily today. It's all about the battles in judiciary right now. Right, the judiciary on the scale there, judiciary versus judiciary, and we know the ongoing story about the rot in judiciary right now. Many of the Supreme Court judges also facing allegations of corruption. That is what we do have inside the People Daily as well. So after these issues, we shall be talking with our panelists this morning. And I just want also to remind you that 300 dead in wake of tropical cyclone Idai. This is the devastation that you can see here. International aid agencies rest yesterday to rescue survivors and meet spiraling humanitarian needs in 3 impoverished countries battered by one of the worst storms to hit Southern Africa in decades. 5 days after tropical cyclone Idai cut a swath through Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Malawi, the confirmed death toll stood at more than 300, and hundreds of thousands of lives were at risk. This is according to officials, and you can follow this story on page 27 of the Daily Nation today. Right, those are the dailies. Make sure you grab a copy for those riveting stories as well. Let me just lastly show you what we do have inside I'll be remiss if I don't show you what we do have inside the East African this week, so that you can grab a copy of it as well, what it holds for us, the East African this week. I'll try and just grab it for you quickly. Wow. You can see it. But I'll do that much later in the course of the program. Of course, I normally promise that and I don't, but I will do that today, I promise. Right, but Supreme Court Judge Jackton Ojwang will now have to face a tribunal to answer to allegations of corruption and abuse of office following a recommendation by the Judicial Service Commission to President Uhuru Kenyatta. According to JAC, the decision follows a no-show by the judge, who had been asked to appear before the commission to answer to charges against him. Justice Ojwang, whose tenure has been marred by controversies, becomes the 4th judge to face such a team.
Presentation of the report by the committee, the full commission deliberated on the same at great length and found that the petition had disclosed sufficient ground to warrant a recommendation to the President to set up a tribunal for the removal of the Honorable Justice Ojwang, and accordingly adopted it. In detailed instances which the petitioners believed constituted grounds of misconduct, impropriety, conflict of interest, and a breach of judicial code of conduct on the part of the Honorable Judge.
Now, more than half of the Supreme Court judges are under siege, petitions tearing into their character and pushing for the removal have either been received by the Judicial Service Commission or are filed and in the evaluation process. At the Court of Appeal and the High Court, even more petitions. Out of the 17 complaints, more than half have been approved. So we ask, is it a revisit, fixing the judiciary, or another round of Hajj? Ken Mijungu has more on this.
Chief Justice David Maraga, Justices Mohammed Ibrahim, Jackton Ojwang, Smokin Wanjala, and Lady Justice Njoki Ndungu all stand accused in 2 petitions sent to their employer, the Judicial Service Commission. The 5 face accusations of gross violation of the Constitution, gross misconduct, misbehavior, incompetence, breach of the Constitution, and oath of office. The Judicial Service Commission has since directed that the concerned judges be served with the petitions and given 14 days to respond to them.
The Judicial Service Commission considered 2 new petitions, one by Yusuf Ibrahim Dimbili against the Honorable the Chief Justice for alleged gross violations of the Constitution, and another by Mohammed Mahmoud Sheikh.
The Deputy Chief Justice is facing her own challenges with an active impropriety case against her that may have the same end as the other cases. Her lawyers have always held that instead of taking her through the court process, she should have been taken to the Judicial Service Commission through the same process. At the Court of Appeal and the High Court, even more petitions, 17 in total, seeking investigations by the Judicial Service Commission into the character and conduct of the judges. 9 petitions have been admitted and the process of dealing with them has begun. 8 petitions, however, were found to be flawed and lacking merit,
and accordingly dismissed them.
This is not the first time the judges of superior courts have faced petitions against them. Nairobi-based lawyer Apollo Mboya filed a petition seeking the removal of Supreme Court Judge Njoki Ndungu from office. In the petition, Mboya questioned Njoki's professional competence and integrity, among other issues, during the case of Raila Odinga versus the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and 2 others in regards to the August 8th general election. In 2018, lawyer Adrian Kamotho Njenga petitioned Parliament accusing Justice Maraga, Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu, and 5 other members of the Judicial Service Commission of violating the Constitution, gross misconduct, and incompetence.
When you hear us criticize the judiciary, it's because we support the judiciary.
These are the reasons why many observers believe there is a deliberate affront against the judiciary.
And I have always said, we have a problem with our judiciary, but regardless, we respect, but we shall revisit.
In January, President Kenyatta asked Maraga to deal with the challenges in the judiciary. He told Maraga to confront the ills in the judiciary and put his house in order. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
Now, flying squad detectives are urging Kenyans who have fallen victims to cash fraud to record statement with the police. This is after a day-long grilling session of 6 suspects in the Barclays Bank seizure of 2 billion shillings, fake cash in $20 million US. The main suspect, Dr. Eric Adede, is also alleged to have been in possession of fake gold.
A day after nabbing of what is said to be fake notes worth $20 million at the Barclays Bank Queensway branch. Detectives made their way back after arresting 6 suspects. This time, the bomb disposal unit was also at the scene following reports of suspicious items in the bank's safe room. On Wednesday afternoon, DCI Director George Kinoti was at the bank's branch together with flying squad boss Musa Yego. The two led yet another operation of nabbing more of what the main suspect, Dr. Eric Adede, had kept at the bank. It is his safe deposit box that had stored the US dollars, with further reports alleging there was fake gold.
Someone talk to you, there is around 30 No.
Following the grilling by flying squad detectives at the Nairobi area, the 6 suspects, only 2 of them were brought here to the Barclays Bank Queensway branch, one of whom is the main suspect, Dr. Eric Adede. Other suspects include Ahmed Shah, who allegedly posed as an investor, 2 ladies, Elizabeth Muthoni and Irene Wairimo Kimani, whose roles were unspecified. Speaking to NTV, Barclays Bank states its 2 officials, Boaz Ochich and Charles Manzi, arrested yesterday, have since been released. Lawyers accompanied them to the flying squad offices as the detectives sought to find out more on what they suspect to be a fake cash syndicate.
I would like whoever is saying it's fake to prove that it's fake, but I have my doubts for now, because what speed? I mean, if it was so fast, if they were able to establish it was fake so fast, why can't they also prefer the charge that fast?
The suspects will be arraigned at the Milimani Law Courts tomorrow. Mel Miendo, NTV.
And police spokesman Charles Owino is attributing the influx of fake currency and gold in the country to the emergence of white-collar related crimes being instigated by wealthy persons in the society. However, Owino says the law enforcement agencies have managed to curtail the vice, as witnessed in recent police crackdowns that led to the discovery of large consignments of fake currencies translating to billions of shillings. Take a listen.
At one point, the trend for people who wanted to steal money was to go and rob banks. But due to the intensity of the way they are monitored, the coming in of the CCTVs in banks, and the development of special units to crack down on robbers, at least you can see the level has gone down.
There was profit. The second round, there was profit. The third round, the foreigners simply disappeared. You see, simply disappeared, and they went with the money.
I live in my home in Karen. I drive a good car, take my children to good school, I have good bank account. Then some dirty man, who cannot speak good Swahili, live about English, comes to you and tells you that I can multiply your money. How? You need to think and say this is not possible. When you see a trend where they are caught, it means that there is nobody to be bought. Maybe they were there and maybe there was somebody to be bought at one particular time. But you may find that either they have lost their contact, maybe they had protection and contacts from other quarters, and maybe that syndicate has been broken. Those are scenarios that are very possible.
And what does this portend, of course, for the economy, and what is on the floor of the House? That is the contentious, the money laundering or the Financial Act right now that they want to amend to remove the cap of making sure that, yes, if there's any transactions in the bank of more than $1 million, that should be, of course, declared. We would just want to hear from our panelists this morning. We shall be discussing this and a raft of other issues as well as far as the state of the economy is concerned. Food security is top of the agenda, and of course they say it is not really the lack of food, but the access and the distribution of it that is a challenge. We want to hear from them as far as this capping is concerned right now. Why are the parliamentarians particularly intent to make sure that it is removed? Earlier I had introduced to you Patrick Obath, who is the Vice President of KEPSA Foundation, also a managing partner with Adam Smith International. We do have with us as well Sachin Gudka, who's the chairman of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Also, we have the CEO of Institute of Economic Affairs. This is Kwame Owino. Dr. Collins Odote is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi and also a columnist with the Business Daily. Eagerly waiting for Peter Biwott, who's CEO of Export Promotion Council, to join us much later in the course of the program. Good morning, gentlemen, again.
Good morning.
Right.
Good morning.
Just in light of what we are discussing as far as the capping or to remove the cap is concerned, maybe we shall begin with you, Patrick Bath, on this. Why do you think the parliamentarians are particularly intent to making sure this cap is removed?
I don't know. I'm a bit cynical about that. If you look at the kind of money that flows during elections, $1 million shillings is a small amount of money for the kind of stuff that flows around at that time.
Yes.
And I see mischief in terms of looking forward to 2022, where they're trying to get this thing away so that they can begin to withdraw large amounts of money to campaign. Yeah? The 1 million shillings was set basically as a threshold to ensure that, you know, sums of money that are moved are declared and people know what it's all about. So I think the actual fact that there's a cap on it, there's nothing wrong with it. It's simply, these days, it's very efficient. You go into the bank, you want to withdraw your money, you declare what it is, and if they're uncomfortable, they say, hang on, we need to check first. Or this is a suspicious activity, and therefore they can either block the transaction or allow you to do it, but then they report it to the central bank. So I don't see any reason why we should start removing that 1 million cap on transactions. In other jurisdictions around the world, they have exactly the same rules, where they're actually capping they don't cap, but they actually sort of put a threshold above which it has to be reported to the authority. And that is all consistent with the process of crime and the anti-money laundering activities globally. So as a country, especially with the graft that is happening now and the stuff that we've seen in terrorism, we need to keep that cap so at least there is an investigation on large withdrawals of money. And 1 million shillings may seem small change to a parliamentarian, but it's big money for the average Kenyan.
But having those 2 billion shillings in fake currencies that we've seen in dollars right now, how can that be very prejudicial to the economy when we have such flows of fake currencies as well, fake gold? And furthermore, the question will be again, a reputable bank like Barclays, how do you be in possession of all this? Because we had also from the corporate affairs manager that she said they have no sorting idea on what people keep in their safes.
Yeah, a safe deposit box is basically exactly that. You provide a safe space. Now, as the renter of that box, I come in, I'm given with my keys, and I walk into that place and I put what I like into that box and I move out. That has been the traditional role of these safety deposit boxes in banks forever. No bank in this world knows what is in those places, right? So to sort of try and ask Barclays to sort of now start going through all the safe deposit boxes
to check what
is not right, yeah? So they will never know, right? Because of the relationship between the customer and the bank and the way the safe deposit boxes have been set. And in terms of fake currency, it's not new. This country is full of locations where people are printing fake currencies. They've been arrested several times and they still keep coming back. Whether a Nigerian guy who disappeared and came back and so forth. So it's something that the police have to continuously, or the law enforcement agencies and investigators have to continuously keep on top of. It's not unique to this country. It's everywhere in the world. But we just have to keep fighting the people who are bringing fake currency in this country.
But in light of what is really happening with the transnational threat of terrorism, and what is happening with the money laundering, people financing terrorists as well, do you think also that is a bit risky when we have safe boxes and we have no sorting idea? Maybe we should try and check out on that particular law that maybe is there or policy from the banks, because now we don't know what people, if these are fake currencies or fake gold, what happens if someone maybe comes with the bomb? Let's hear from Sachin.
I think just to weigh in and also add to Patrick's comment on the earlier issue on the cap, we would be in breach of the money laundering guidelines worldwide if we were to get rid of the cap. The $10,000 cap has been there in the US for some time. It's worked fairly successfully, I would say, and there's no reason why Kenya should not abide by it. Banks are giving out a lot of suspicious transaction alerts to the central bank every day on particularly transactions where they feel there's not enough backup or where they need more information. So the central bank is receiving a lot of STAs at the moment from the banks. So I'm not in support of removing the cap on of $10,000 for this. The second item you mentioned was, should we have some sort of disclosure requirements for holding things in safe custody? When typically the best way to do it is to probably have an insurance policy along with opening the safe deposit box. So the contents of the box, etc., are listed. There is an insurance policy in place, and it's visible both to the bank, who's the custodian of the safe custody box, as well as to the person opening the safe deposit box, and everything is clear. I believe even worldwide, people can store what they like. I don't think there's a compulsion to disclose what's in a safe deposit box. However, I think you can mitigate it by having an insurance policy in place along with this.
Right, comment.
Well, I don't think that okay, to start with, I am as a Kenyan concerned that we use the scary tactics of terrorism to try and undermine people's ability to conduct transactions and everything. I mean, just a month and a half ago, we suffered from a serious terrorist attack. None of that money was transported through a safety deposit box or through a bank or anything else. So even the threshold of $1 million, I think it's an artificial one. So yes, we can maintain it because it's part of conventional banking regulations, but the view that if you allow transactions above that, then you've allowed terrorists. I mean, the terrorist attack that we took was devastating. Far, far below $1 million shillings was required to execute it. So I think we have to be careful here that we're not crying wolf when it doesn't. So that's it. This transaction is 10,000. I actually think this is where banks need to be put under pressure, because if transactions are occurring, usually the kind of people who face those, or rather, let me say, they're politically exposed persons for the purposes of corruption and money laundering. Some of whom come from the neighboring countries, whether it's South Sudan, a few of those countries, and are known politically exposed persons, and they transact huge sums of money using Kenyan banks, and they're not touched. So to think now that if we just have that threshold, it's going to do, I mean, banks have to examine themselves and ask themselves on the basis of just risk-based analysis, which are the kind of people who are supposed to be. So I think we shouldn't try to give ourselves any look of seriousness by saying, look, if we place these thresholds, suddenly the central bank was here when barely literate girls were carrying 70 kilograms worth of money out of banks in and out, and some of those banks didn't do anything until there was political pressure, and even then, right now, it's pot here and there. So really, institutions in Kenya have to start doing their job and stop hiding behind terrorism, and that goes for safe deposit boxes as well. You see, the way safe deposit boxes are, they're supposed to be that. They're supposed to be safe deposits, and you're supposed to have that comfort that nobody knows what I am. I have a key, I have a deposit, and I have that. What you do is you sign an indemnity with the bank, telling them that, look, you're not supposed to have within this safe deposit box anything that would be, and banks have that template. Yes. It's also governed by international laws, conventions rather. So you will not keep anything that would destroy the premises, would be destructive to the bank, would be destructive, or anything that would be legal that would expose the bank to the kind of pressure we see from the police right now. So if you sign that, it's a contract. And if somebody does that, whatever, breaches that contract, then we know what happens. I mean, the bank could sue as well, but also the bank has responsibility if they become suspicious to go back there and state that we have a suspicious client, and would ask the central bank or somebody else to do. Because it's, so the idea that we need to introduce new laws, and we're using the scare tactics of terrorism, I think we are going too far. People need to ask themselves, how many deposit boxes are there in this country? How many of them hold 2 billion shillings in, or rather 2 billion shillings worth of cash in them? And is this new rule worth it? That you have to declare what it is and it has to be known, because then it's not a deposit box. So I guess I think we shouldn't overreact because of one single one. There are probably other things in those deposit boxes that we should, but maybe what this we should ask is to place that responsibility on banks to ensure that you don't have people moving in with sacks and big boxes every now and again without triggering some compliance requirement for them to actually verify that. So the problem with these very heavy rules is they'll apply to somebody like me and all that. And when those politicians tear down many of these banks, they'll be allowed to carry those transactions anyway, including people sitting in cabinet. They'll do those transactions and we'll come back here and all that. So there's this hypocrisy that I'm concerned about. We need to be safe. I think we have international regulations, but the people who actually violate them tend to be politically exposed persons, and we know who they are. So let's face them.
So you're not really in favor of this capping of the 1 million?
No. I'm just saying the capping is in international convention.
Yes.
But let's not cheat ourselves, and the central bank should be honest with us by telling us that if you do that, you're going to stop the link to terrorism. The link between safe deposit boxes and the link between that cap and terrorism is completely tenuous. It's not real. In the empirical world. Nobody has said that one person who transacted 1 million was therefore able to execute a terrorist attack in Garissa or Nairobi. There's no connection there.
But
so let's not use that to scare
the rhyme
people.
and reason of terrorism, is it the overarching factor that, yeah, they're actually putting it? I think there are many facets to actually this particular ruling.
But unfortunately, it's not true. There's no link between that and terrorism. There isn't. It's not been shown, especially in Kenya. There isn't. So let's say conventions internationally require us to guard this, to prevent people, especially people who are stealing public money, from transferring money outside. That's fine.
Right.
Because it's mostly actually, in Kenya's case, it'll be corruption and politically exposed persons,
Exactly.
not the terrorists.
Yeah.
The terrorist question is one of intelligence, gathering intelligence and making sure that you stop this before they come. If a terrorist has transferred money, often it's too late already.
Right. Thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Collins Odote.
Yeah, thanks, Debarl. I actually support both concerns. I support the concern about capping and the concerns about safe box. I think the two are related. They're related because they help us to deal with a challenge about our finances. If you see what's been happening over the last 2 years, for the first time, politicians are now complaining. And anytime you hear politicians complaining, in most instances, it's about self-interest. Unfortunately, they're supposed to be complaining about public interest, but they complain much more about self-interest. And the caps, for example, the people complaining most are not businessmen, surprisingly. Yet the people who are supposed to be moving money most are actually businessmen. The people complaining most are politicians because of what they do with the money. I agree with Kwame that the bigger problem, I think explaining this largely as a terrorism issue misses the point. There are instances where terrorists will also be facilitated by moving that large sums of money, but I think the biggest focus should be the illegal movement of money through corrupt practices. That, I think, is a bigger problem. The end result is the same. For that reason, I think the issue of capping is an important one. Having said so, we should be honest that capping on its own will not solve the problem. It must come with disclosure. And I think the bigger problem that banks must deal with is that they must be able to be much more to disclose what is happening within their premises. Because if you do so, even without capping, you will be able to solve the problem. If you mix both of them, you'll even be able to solve the problem much better. But if we only do capping and not do disclosure, we won't solve the problem. But unfortunately, Kenyans are wise. I know of instances where people would sign checks of 50,000. In a partnership, the limit is no one partner can sign anything above 100,000. You require 2 partners. So what do? I sign 1 million, but sign each of them as 50,000 each. Still ends up to the same thing. So I think if you only capped, and I was able to withdraw 200,000, 6 of them in a day, it will still be 1.2 million. I will have defeated the rule. So I think we must mix capping with disclosure. The second is safe boxes, and I have 2 or 3 sentences, some different from my colleagues. I think the first one, we must be honest that Barclays Bank did not do anything illegal. So that we don't mix things. They didn't do anything illegal, because what they did is to provide what is allowed, which is safe boxes. By their nature, safe boxes are safe. That's number one. Number two, that is not money, because money laundering, the money will pass through the bank. This is money that will still be available in my house. Having said so, I think we must realize that laws come in to solve a problem. And the reality is that there's a problem. Because if safe boxes now get used in the manner in which this is being accused to be used, we must find a way by which that is dealt with, because we can't be able to allow a situation where something that is essentially safe is then now becoming a conduit for carrying out illegal or unfair practices. The reason why this is important is if you add on to the fact that there's now greater focus on banks, greater focus on people withdrawing a certain amount of money, politicians and people engaged in bad practices are finding clever ways of ensuring this money exists. And unfortunately for us, safe boxes may be a clever way. I think our strategy must be any loophole that we find must be able to be tightened. And I think one of the loopholes, legitimately, Debarl, is the loophole of safe boxes. We must find a way. But as we do so, let's not blame the bank. Because it's not as if the bank did something illegal. It's just that people are creatively every day finding loopholes to avoid what essentially is a big fight against people who are misusing monies in the country.
Right, Patrick, you have something else on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's just to sort of sum up what has been discussed. Like you had in Switzerland, where they used to sort of have this very secret thing about people keeping money in Switzerland, and the laws in the country were such that you could never find out any movement of money in that country. There may be a time that comes when effectively you have to change like Switzerland did, and now it's no longer a safe haven for stashing money quietly, because they've woken up to the reality that they were a safe haven for crime, more or less. And the rules around safe deposit boxes, whilst they're okay now, the kind of things that people are doing, the morality of the world has changed. And the safe deposit boxes are purely just safe, secure places for people who had, of high integrity, who wanted to deposit things. But now if people are starting to do other things, there may be necessity to sort of change the way they're managed, but still maintain the security and the privacy that people require. But the privacy is not going to be absolute. It may need to be tempered in a way that a third party will have to make sure that you're not using it for the wrong reason. Yeah? But to change them drastically and just make them open, I think would be the wrong thing to do. Yeah.
All right. Yes.
Well, one radical way of removing all the fake currency in the country is what India did, which was to bring in a new banknotes, which removed all the old banknotes in circulation. So people actually had to go and declare their old currency and exchange it for the new currency. But there were some rules. It caused a lot of chaos in the country, in India. I'm still not sure whether it was entirely successful, but it does cause disruption and does remove all the excessive fake currency we have in the country as well. Yeah.
Fake currencies, and of course not just the fake currencies, but many of the monies that are stashed away right now, not through the banking system, but people have their safe places in their houses, and they are stashing away all this money. How then do we go legally with that particular route, making sure that, yes, for people who cannot really declare the wealth, and they cannot really tell where the money is, they maybe stashed them away overseas, and maybe also we have them here in the country. How can we go about now cleaning that system? Kwame.
Well, you see, this is something the central bank, my view, to be honest, is the central bank has obligations to monitor currency movements and all this. And that it took, well, you don't know whether they were involved or they knew, but somehow some intelligence made its way to the criminal investigation, Directorate of Criminal Investigation, and they caught this. This is itself a good sign that someone is vigilant and alert. So I think we need not to overplay it. I don't think there are too many people, to be honest, out there who have 2 billion shillings to park in a safe deposit box, or $20 million US to park in a safe deposit box. My view about prudential regulations, and yes, I understand all our concerns about terrorism. I think they're overplayed in this case, because most of these people are not related to terrorists. They're probably related to some suspicious transactions elsewhere. But the people who expose us to this kind of danger are people who have the ability to influence public affairs. They're either politicians or people who are able to move money through that. Politically exposed persons, the way most prudential regulations go about it is to focus your risks on politically exposed persons. And your average business person who has $20 million would park it in a bank and receive a really, really good rate for it every month. Cannot park it in the only guy who's going to put that in a safe deposit box is somebody who intends to use it for a nefarious purpose. Yes. So obviously it's telling you that these are not people who are trading or who are businessmen who need to make money. No wonder they were printing it, or whether this money is fake or not is also a question where the credibility is still, we're not sure whether it was or not. But in the end, the surveillance, in my view, of the central bank, if they know that Kenya has become a center for, and that happens when you hub your businesses and you're relatively open, this tends to happen. So my view is to put the central bank and the special crimes units in the policemen, in the police service to look, do you guys have your sights on the real risks to the economy, or are you following politicians around and stuff like that? So that these guys have been able to do this, because that's a huge amount of money in itself, is an indictment, partly to the central bank and also the kind of people who do this, because this is not your average person. Whatever those 6 people who are arrested, 6 or 5 people who are arrested, they're not doing an average business. Even if you had a printing press that prints this amount of money, it's an industrial scale business. It's an industrial scale business. So it is. So we are not dealing with small people. So to make it look like this is something that came out of the blue, or it's something that's too common, I suspect not. I think this is very, very large scale, almost global level money laundering. Currency printing, or money laundering or circulating cash. That should be in the sights of the police. So whether we put in rules or not, I think the influence of these people on the markets is something that should have been in the radar of the central bank and the economic crimes unit in the police.
Maybe lastly, we can hear from Collins as well. Could we tie this particular capping of the 1 million shillings that the parliamentarians are trying to actually remove with the campaign financing bill? How do they augur well? Because I think that's where the ticklish issue is, where we have corruption and the campaigns also hanging together during maybe the campaigning periods.
Debarl, I have held the view that I think our approach on campaign financing is actually the wrong approach. Our approach on campaign financing focuses on limits of how much you can spend. I think that's the wrong end of the stick. The greater end of the stick must be to focus on disclosure. Paper trail. And once you have the paper trail, for me, and it even goes down to this problem we're solving, the bigger issue is essentially to develop a paper trail and movement, for example, to a cashless society where things about a certain amount of money are not paid by cash. They are paid through either an EFT or through the bank, not for any reason except that we are able to then know that Collins over the last 5 months paid for X, Y, Z, W. We are able to know as a politician, and when we have disclosure, so that in terms of campaign financing, because there are 2 approaches. We don't focus on what IEBC was trying to do, saying you can only spend X million for this campaign, because then I will spend it through Kwame and through the rest of my colleagues. But if we then say that we have a record of how much did you spend on your campaigns, you are able to then do creative things and say, but you spent 100 million in your campaigns, but last year you declared 5 million. So this another 95 can only have been donations. Who donated them? Where is the list? Then you can go to the donee and say, but Kwame, you donated 100 million to Collins' campaign. Where does that money come from? How did you not pay tax? How is that not recorded? Then we are able to catch people. The second thing is I think the people who are charged with the responsibility of doing surveillance must do a better job. You see, the only difference over the last few months isn't that a law has been changed. The only difference is that somebody is doing a much better job than they should have done. And I think many of us have complained in the past that if we have public institutions that sleep on their job, we can complain as much as we want, we can change as many laws as we want, we will go nowhere. But if we have people who focus on doing the right thing, we will solve the problem. Yes, India changed their currency so that people had to go through it. But you see, that's a one-off. Because if you change it today, tomorrow, these people will still print the new ones that you've changed. So I think for me, we must look at the entire basket of the different options we have. And I think for me, one of the most critical ones is, two of the most critical ones, in my view, is 1, ensuring that there's records of financial transactions, and 2, ensuring that the entities that are responsible for monitoring do a much better job of that. If you do those 2 things, the rest of the things will not come to complement. This will be the key things in dealing with money laundering.
All right.
Yeah. Actually, I think I agree with Dr. Collins. That the amount of data that is available, say, in the central bank, of all the transactions that have been put in by all the banks, that just sits there, and nothing is done with it, right? And in this day and age of technology, and the big data, they can put in, they can be reporting those things electronically and be able to do some initial very quick analysis to see whether there are trends emerging from different transactions, and begin to focus to focus on areas where there is suspicion. I mean, I can be Patrick Obath, I can have 6 accounts, 1 in each bank, and I can do $1 million in each of them. And I'm within the law, but I've withdrawn 6 million, right? And I then can go and do whatever I need to do with it. But who then, each bank reports their own, but nobody aggregates that at the top. That is what is missing. And we need to get to a point where effectively the disclosure about stuff is done, and then the analysis of that disclosure is then done very, very quickly, and you can then begin to sort of get on top of these potential crime, potential money laundering, and all that kind of stuff, purely by having that information. So we've got a good basis, but you're not using it effectively.
Right. Finally, Gudka, on this.
I think I do believe the AI tools that the bank can deploy would be strong. They need to connect the dots. As he says, there are 6 accounts, and all 6 banks are reporting $10,000 transactions every day, and so on, and across all 6 accounts. There needs to be that vetting mechanism at the top, which can identify and track and question what's going on here. Why does this person need so much cash every day? Yes.
Right. Kwame, you have a comment on the campaign financing bill as well?
No, I don't think so. I think one of the other reasons why we get this wrong is the belief that that the only reason politicians take money is to campaign. If you're going to wait for the campaign period to start doing this, you're 4 years too late, to be honest. Because campaign financing on its own, I mean, just financing campaigns on its own is not where all the money that gets lost ends up in. I mean, these people keep much bigger balances for themselves because they need to also grow their wealth in that way. So it has to be eternal vigilance. And my view is you don't even need new laws. Most of the people who are able to transact, I mean, as the central bank governor told Parliament, that look, 99.7%, 0.3% of all accounts held in Kenya have less than 1 million shillings and below. Right? So it tells you are dealing with a very small number of people and a small number of accounts. And if you do a network analysis, you'll probably find it's the same guys either paying each other or receiving money from certain things. So really, you don't need an axe to cut this. This is something that requires more surgical blade kind of thing. And we cannot escape without putting intelligence into it. And by intelligence, I don't mean the security kind. I think, the kind of forensics that you need to put in it and actually find the real guy. The idea that if you block every 1 million shillings that you're saving as this thing, I think is a blunt instrument, and to be honest, it's hiding behind central bank and these people doing the real work that needs to be done. And if you block one avenue, they'll start to keep that money in vaults. And if you block banks, they'll put it somewhere else. So the point is, block the source of the funds, not the transactions that follow from it.
Thank you. Right. We want to take a short break right now. When we circle back from, of course, the break, we, of course, want to focus deeply on the war on corruption. Earlier on, we had the multi-agency, of course, anti-corruption conference at the Bomas of Kenya. Many resolutions came up from there. But the question is, are we moving the needle a jot just in fighting corruption in this country, right? We want to look at this with our panelists. Of course, you can also drive the show with me by heading over to our Twitter handle, which is AM11TV. AM11TV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. So let's get talking also on social media on the war on corruption. Don't go away. Faced with the panelists, I'm holding court this morning with Patrick Obath, who is the Vice Chair of KEPSA Foundation. Also, we do have with us as well, this is Sachen Goodker, who is the Chairman of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Kwama Wino, who is the CEO of Institute of Economic Affairs. Also, we're having Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lecturer at the University of Nairobi, a columnist with the Business Daily. I'm getting regrets here from Peter Biwott, who is CEO of Exports Promotion Council. He can't make it today, he's running late. He apologizes, he won't be with us. But we continue with the conversation. Right, let's just begin with Patrick on this as well, because we had the conference at the Bomas of Kenya, and many resolutions came as far as fighting corruption is concerned, from the church, the laity, government officials, NGOs, civil societies, parachurch ministries. We want just to hear from you so far, looking at what is happening on the scene right now and the way it's being politicized. Can we uncouple politics from corruption?
I think corruption, you find corruption in all spheres of life in Kenya at the moment. It's almost become a way of life. And people just do it. They couch it in different words and they do it in different ways. But it's not about the cash changing hands. It's also people giving each other favors when they shouldn't. So when you look at the wider, the wider corruption, it is still happening. That is true. But I think from the multi-sectoral initiative against corruption, when they had the conference at Bomas, you saw some very quick wins that happened. The first thing that happened, you saw the DCI, the public prosecutor, and the judiciary went and met. They had a session saying, listen guys, how can we work and make sure that things will work, we are complementing each other. They recognized their independence, but they also recognized that they needed to understand how they can make things work. That was a positive. During the Bomas conference, a lot of these guys were shooting at each other like crazy. But they realized that that was not going to help. So they went back and they began to put together a framework for actually working together. That's a positive. And you can see the impact already. Even the stuff you're seeing around people now reporting the judges of the High Court, whatever it is, and so forth, there is a positive impact that people are now saying, I can go out into the open and make reports. The various sectors that met during the Bomas conference have gone back into their groups, into their sectors. And what is happening, I think Sachin will also be able to talk about their own sector. Each of them have gone back and said, now let us look at ourselves and see what our action plan is going to be in accordance with what came out during the Bomas conference. So there have been meetings over the last 6 weeks of all the different sectors. And we're hoping that within about another 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have a national plan over the next 3 to 4 years, that each sector is drawing up as to how they're going to look at corruption in their own sector. What you want to avoid is what used to happen before, and that was the premise of the Bomas conference. We don't want to point fingers at other people. Corruption is generated within an organization, within a sector, and they're the ones who know how best that corruption is generated. So they have to fight it within that sector. And then if each sector does it, then effectively you can minimize the likelihood of corruption happening. But if you try and fight other people and your own backyard is still soiled, your backyard will begin to influence, and corrupt other people. So that work is being done, and we will be towards the end, middle of April, you will begin to hear each sector now coming out with their action plan. The private sector met about 2 weeks ago, and they've actually begun to put their action plan together on the bigger basis, but each of the sectors within the private sector is also doing their own.
All right, Sachin?
Corruption's a fancy word for theft. Okay. This country, people in this country are stealing from each other, both government and private sector. The entire nexus of corruption actually it's in every fabric of the society, and if we don't break that, get out of that quickly, I think we're doomed as a nation. The second aspect is, as Patrick mentions, is although each sector is working individually and so on, there needs to be certain fundamentals in place. The prosecution has to have a solid case which it can present to the judiciary, convictions need to be made, but at the same time, forfeiture of assets and collection and imposition of heavy fines should act as a heavy deterrent to make sure and serve as an example to other people to say, you will be jailed, you will get your assets forfeited, and this is the outcome if you continue to persist in this. We need a few high-profile cases just initially to go through that process to enable a precedent to be set, to actually say this crime does not pay. And if we're diligent on this, I think we can achieve a quick win on that. Yeah.
Right. Let's hear from Comment. And what do you think also on this particular new legislation that maybe Ndidi Nyoro is trying to come up with? This is the act. The act is amended in section 48. He says that says. Let me just read all of it so that you can understand what it's on the front page of the Business Daily. Yes. And on page 45, page 5 of the Business Daily, individuals convicted of corruption will be imprisoned for more than 10 years, fined more than 1 million shillings, and compelled to pay back twice the amount of benefit or loss they occasioned if MPs approve a bill. Currently, the law stipulates that a person convicted of corruption is liable to a fine of not exceeding 1 million or imprisoned for a term not exceeding 10 years or both. And this is what Ndidi Nyoro has introduced, that the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Amendment Bill 2019 in the National Assembly to prescribe a minimum penalty to corruption and act as a deterrent for theft of state funds. We've had so many of these legislations, and this is yet another one, but we're not seeing any discernible difference on the word corruption.
Okay, I think one of the ways in which we make a mistake is to think that if you ratchet upwards the punishment for a crime, that you drop it. I mean, that is important to have stiff penalties for crime is useful. But the truth is, if we haven't convicted anyone in this administration, right from NYS to today, which NYS was 5 years ago when it started, to today, it doesn't matter if we make if we say that, I mean, you'll be killed 5 times over, it doesn't matter. We are not convicting anyone, so that tells you that the punishment alone is not going to suffice. But I think the way to do it is that when we as Kenyans talk corruption, we mean very many things, from the small bribe that somebody pays to, or responding to extortion from a policeman, all the way to. But my view is that we need to focus on the big part, which is procurement fraud. Procurement fraud is what leads to billions getting lost. It's what we saw leading young girls taking 70 million shillings. I mean, or rather 40, 50 million in a sack, carrying it off a bank at 3 a.m. and stuff like that. That's the bigger part. I'm not necessarily saying it's morally worse. I mean, any form of corruption is bad, but the one that is most destructive to the state and destroys the authority of government is just basically when money is getting lost in that way. And there are 2 reasons. There are 2 ways. One, I mean, I can plug in here. Today, the IEA is launching, 1 hour from now, we'll be launching an analysis we've done of the Auditor General's reports. Now, the Auditor General's reports tells you why we have a problem with corruption. The biggest violation among many ministries, including ministries that violate 1 year but they still get more money, is the absence of records. Failure to keep proper accounting records so that you can actually verify whether the money was used and whether it was used lawfully.
Isn't that deliberate?
Certainly. And that's what tells you that if we don't fix that, who's responsible for that? The Principal Secretary and the Cabinet Secretary. How can you have a ministry spending 80 billion shillings a year? Some spend 300 billion shillings a year, which means you're spending $1 billion per day. And when the Auditor General comes after 15 months, you do not have your records in place. Something mischievous is happening. So here, the responsibility is actually on the executive. It's the president and his cabinet colleagues who must say, our records will be clean, and if your records are not clean, that in itself would be suggestive that either you condone corruption or you're participating in it. That's the first part. So if we don't clean the way government records are, I mean, small farms in Kenya, if you do not have your records, your shareholders will close you down. So how the Kenyan government spends 3 trillion shillings a year, and then you say at the end of the year that 50% of government departments don't have records that can be subjected to audit in itself. We can hold corruption conferences, but the truth is the president needs to speak to his accounting officers and ask them to shape up. So that's the first. The second then is always there's the move of money. There's movement of money. And that's where all these money laundering and the laws that we are speaking about today follow the cash. Because government does not pay in cash, government pays money in checks. If you follow through banks, you will know who's receiving what money, and you can follow that and actually connect the dots backwards. These two strong protections, is if we don't do, it doesn't matter whether, and I think Honorable Nyoro, he's well-meaning, but just ratcheting upwards, you can make it look like you can kill somebody plus their family plus their village, but if you're not convicting them, it doesn't matter what the punishment is.
All right. Let's hear from Konzo on this.
I think what Honorable Nyoro is doing is a very small thing, because the law currently, if you look at what we're being told in the Business Daily, puts a maximum that you can't fine somebody more than $1 million or jail them for more than 10 years. And he just wants to flip that from not less than 1 million to not less than 10 years. To that extent, I think there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. Nothing at all. He's actually doing a good thing in terms of that you can't, with the amounts of money that we're talking about, you can't be saying that if people are stealing billions, you can only define them for $1 million or less. That's number one. But number two is what Kwame says. That should not be our focus in the fight against corruption. Because the bigger problem hasn't been the less than stiff penalties. The bigger problem has been the implementation of whatever penalties exist now. We know several years ago we tried making a change to our traffic laws and increase the amounts of fines that people would be charged. Debarl, traffic offenses have not gone down. Traffic accidents have not gone down. Because the problem is not the quantum. The problem is the implementation of what are figures. If we were saying that 100 people have been found guilty, but those 100 people have only been fined $1 million, then changing it to more than $1 million would be solving the problem. But if we don't do so, we aren't dealing with the bigger issue. The second thing is, I don't know whether the conference in January has been successful or not. But what I know is that for the last 6 months, corruption has been top headlines for our country on us every day. And not like before, where it would be Kwame and a few ordinary Kenyans complaining. Now it is reports about who is being investigated, which politician is feeling the pressure. And I think that is a step in the right direction. And we owe it to ourselves as Kenyans to be able to laud when steps in the right directions are being done. So what the agencies responsible for fighting corruption have done over the last few months is a useful thing. But there are two things that we must be able to deal with. The first thing we must be able to deal with is those efforts must translate to some results. Because at the end of the day, it is those results that communicate a message. The message that has been communicated in the past is that we can investigate however much we want, we can take to people to court however much we want, we will never punish anybody. That's been the message. It is wrong to accuse one agency for that problem, and I think that's where we've been missing it in the past. I think the mistake is the judiciary, I think the mistake is DCI, I think the mistake is DPP. I think we must stop the idea of the buck stops with X. It must be that for all the agencies responsible, they must realize that the efficacy of the process is when the process delivers results. And if we have the conversations we've been having about money is being lost, somebody must pay for it. It doesn't matter who it is, but that person who is responsible must, because somebody is responsible. Money does not fly. It is picked by a human being. It takes me to my next issue, Debarl. I think a lot of the times, and Patrick was talking about this when we were offline, a lot of the times we focus too much on processes. A lot of the focus, we focus too much on technology. And processes and technology are not results. What we need is results. So it is not about how many more laws, it's not about how many more people, it's not about how many more conversations, it's about what results are we seeing. And that's the place where I think this process must go to for us to be able to ensure that there is bigger delivery of what's going on. But my last point is, I think as a Kenyan, the efforts are on the right track as of now. The only thing that I think might cloud our issues is our politicians. Our politicians, by their very nature, wants to ensure that the debate is a debate about politics and not a debate about fighting corruption. And we must stop that.
I think that I'd like to sort of come back to the objectives of the multi-sectoral initiative against corruption. The big thing, and I think all of us have fallen into the same trap, we're talking about convictions and big names and so forth and so on. The objective of the conference was to actually prevent corruption. And the prevention isn't when you get big names being convicted.
Yes.
It is the soft issues at the source of corruption. And that will not hit the headlines, right? It's basically a war of attrition that has to be fought institution by institution, sector by sector, to prevent corruption. And to prevent corruption, you have to understand the causes of corruption at the grassroots. Now, that is not going to happen overnight. We really have to individually, sector by sector, understand what is causing corruption in our sector. The judiciary are sort of now in the open. People are talking about getting bribes and what have you and so forth. It was the judiciary. Understand, how do your judges corrupt? How are they corrupted as judges? What processes happen within the judiciary to make this happen? Go to the lands office, the same thing. The lands office people are the people who know how corruption happens in that place. I can't go there and tell them. I may understand, I may think, but it is designed within that area. So we really have to start thinking that, yes, we can have all these preventive measures, but the success of the anti-corruption initiative is not around big names. It's around the time when the DCI, the Office of the DPP, and the EACC have no work in the area of corruption. Then the success will be there, right? If they have no work and corruption is not happening, then the MSISC will have succeeded, right? So really, I think the deterrent is good, to put it and ratchet it up and do whatever it is. The agencies have got to start working, yes, but really we have to start stopping corruption at its roots. And then the people who you cannot help, who are basically pathological corruptors, those guys then face the law. Because there are people whose job it is basically to be corrupt. And they will spend their whole life going around that stuff. And those you can't prevent, let them be nabbed and locked in.
Unfortunately, Patrick, where the cancer had reached is you require some jolt. And
Yeah.
you know, over the last few years, we've accused EACC of thinking that the only thing to do is to be able to do awareness and to be able to change the hearts of the people. Unfortunately, we were preaching to the wind. And I think for me, while stopping it is useful, and as you rightly say, in the long run, in the short run, we require some jolt. And some jolt is for people to realize, wait a minute, this is unacceptable. You know, we'd reached a stage where, I think it's 2 years ago, that the Aga Khan Institute did a study, and every young person was, the majority of young people were looking up to the people who are corrupt.
Yes.
They were saying, I want to be rich, whichever way it takes. For that kind of person, it doesn't matter how much we preach to them. We must, first of all, be able to change the narrative so that the young people who are growing up realize that actually, if you are corrupt, you are not the leader of anything. Instead, you are either in jail or spending the bulk of your time in court corridors trying to battle about those allegations. I think for me that's important. I agree that in the long run, issues about trying to ensure that we prevent it is useful, but where we had reached, the idea about prevention was actually an excuse not to deal with the issue. And that's the challenge that we had as a country.
Right, good on this as well. Maybe also looking at what is on the front page of a Star. Can I just give us an inkling? Because we wake up every day and there is always a splash. If it's not one part of a government, maybe it's the private sector. Now this is what is on the e-citizen happening right now. DCI probes missing 5.6 billion shillings. E-citizen cash, you know, who wants to know where money collected from Kenyans has disappeared. Private company set up a pay bill number linked to the platform and collected the funds. I think it is sickening when we normally do paper review every day and we have such headlines Monday to Friday.
In a way, it's good we are having these headlines every day. So at least it's coming out and there's a discussion about it. And eventually it will get to the stage where there'll be so much public disgust and momentum building up against this that there will have to be radical action taken. Right now, what we're seeing is a lot of noise, people at funerals saying, you're targeting my community, you're doing this, that, the other. Frankly, theft is theft. If you've stolen, you deserve to be punished and your assets forfeited. It's simple. It's as simple as that. And the reason why these things are coming out is perhaps there is a narrative that is being built, and there is more and more what we call strategic leakages to the media to say this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, and the story feeds itself. We virtually every single day we are seeing a headline in the paper. We didn't used to see that before. The numbers are staggering. $56 million here, $210 million in the dam, and so on. The sheer scale of all this is actually abhorrent to taxpayers. When taxpayers look at these amounts of money that are being stolen and are not being used for development, I think the taxpayer has every right to question, should I really continue paying my taxes? Because it's all being wasted. We need to fulfill the narrative. We need the investigations completed. We need some arrests and things. What the multi-party conference on corruption did was, yes, we'll do root cause analysis. We will understand the exact nature of the problem. We will then do, for example, Ishikawa's fishbone analysis, man-machine method, and so on, identify the root cause of the problem, and try and fix that problem structurally, including ethics classes and so on for our children. If children are aspiring to be politicians or to have that get-rich-quick mentality, I think we have a serious structural problem in our society. So it will be an evolutionary process. We need to combine the evolutionary process with a revolutionary process and say it's got to be business unusual, not business as usual. So I do appreciate that at least things are coming out. The fact is the amounts that are being looked at, it seems as though everything is in billions, nothing is in the millions. And we've just got huge amounts being stolen through systems and processes. We need to fix those processes and systems. And it needs a concerted effort on procurement. It needs a concerted effort on fixing the loopholes in IFMIS and so on, which allow all these kinds of things to happen. So there needs to be a crack team within government or rapid response team addressing and stopping or stemming the leakages. At the same time, the investigations need to continue. Yeah.
Comment on this, because I think as a country we borrowed a lot of money, running into trillions of dollars. I think right now
billions of dollars. Yes.
Yeah, it's around $7 trillion. But they are saying
$billion.
$billion. Yes. $billion. Yeah, that's correct. They cannot actually account for around I can't get quite the right figures. Is it how many amount of cash cannot be accounted for from the ones that we've borrowed?
It's difficult. I think most of it is when you see I think one of the things the saddest case about Kenya is that in the last few years it was very difficult to post a debate around government spending of money without it looking like you're making a political point. It was clear from 2015-2016 that government was borrowing money, it was not accounting for it, and was spending it in questionable ways. But it was just difficult. The only thing that has brought us to the point where it's a little bit admitted right now, it's clear government has a cash crunch. It's not paying on time. So obviously everybody has to come back. And then it was also predictable, because I concentrate again on the Auditor General's reports. Even the Auditor General's reports themselves became politicized. When you talked about Eurobond, you saw a very rude comment from the president to the Auditor General's office. Well, this is an officer working according to the constitution and all that. And it was clear that there was some hubris in this Jubilee administration that you can't touch us. Don't question us. We are beyond questioning. We are some royalty that should not be questioned, even if we are spending public money. I think it's crumbled. But the unfortunate thing is that it's crumbled with showing that a lot of things that we spent and threw money on was clearly about big projects for the purposes of the same procurement fraud that is here. So I think much more is going to crawl from the cupboards. Kenyans are going to pay, because obviously we are entitled to, I mean, we as a sovereign state, obviously, I mean, because of sovereignty, most of these were loans. They're going to be paid for. Their tax burden is going to continue. But in my view, it tells you something which is the place of a democratic society and alternative voices that need to be heard. Even the media at some time was very, itself swallowed the Kool-Aid, which was like, look, let's speak positive. Politics has become too aggressive. Everybody's questioning everything the president and his cabinet colleagues are doing. And yet audit reports were already available. Everything else was about elections and who's trying to win what political office. We lose the ball and think that just because somebody has political power legitimately gained or not means that they're beyond question. These kind of things happen. And that should be our biggest lesson. It's the same as what we have now, that we leave professional commentary or things that can be determined by professionals. So for instance, a question of fact, we have a farmer and people have died. It's not a matter of political debate for someone to say that government statement says that it hasn't. That's not even something that the press, but the press is still questioning, did people really die? And you have your own pictures showing it. So that's the unfortunate thing about public discourse in this country, that it has become subject to political commentary. I mean, it's become subject to political embellishment, which is what do the politicians say. Some things are just fact. We invested, borrowed money, used weak systems. Because of those weak systems, I think a lot of that money will not be accountable and accounted for, and some of it has been spent in ways that are not effective in terms of improving public welfare.
Well, the figure I was struggling with is it 7 trillion shillings, yeah, that was borrowed, and we cannot really account for 2 trillion shillings right now. And we're still looking for other, not for another Eurobond too, which is we are also looking for a Sukuk bond as well. So are we still remaining none the wiser as far as this management of his finances is concerned?
I think it's clear. I mean, this year alone, the estimates, and this is from the Treasury alone, stating in the budget policy statement, that we are going to spend close to $10 billion, which is almost 1 trillion shillings, just paying debt and debt servicing for both the principal and all that, and that will be. Our expected tax rates, our expected tax collection will be close to 1.5, 1.6, certainly not 1.7. So basically what that means is that 60% of our total collection will go to paying debts. We are at the point where we are borrowing one debt to pay for the earlier ones. That's usually a signal of poor financial management. It's clear. It's not political statement. That's just basically anybody who can look at a balance sheet knows. Somebody needs to answer for how did we get here. And the only way we got here was executing projects, whether it's the dams, whether it's the last mile project, whether it's the pipeline. We invested in projects that did not release money. But most importantly, just like the SGR, we paid 3 times more than we should have paid for that equivalent service. So yes, and it's not just that we were bad negotiators. It is very, very clear that most of these were motivated by people who on the side or even trading with themselves got to keep public money in terms of whether it's commissions or backhanded payments, or whether it's commissions received on that. That's it. Our public finances in the last 5 years have been a mess.
All right. So are we in any way, because I was speaking with someone and he was telling me, if we're not very careful, in the next maybe 3 years, we're going to face a sovereign insolvency as a country. Are we headed there? Are we even teetering on the borders of actually heading there in any way, Collins?
Debarl, I think the last 2 days, there's been some interesting Kenyans who have posted on social media that Kenya is closed for innovations. And they seem to be saying that it is not 3 years away, it is now.
It is now.
And I think if you ask yourself, why are we having this conversation? You know, if you look at President Moi's time and the challenges around corruption then, and you ask about which scandal you remember, you'll remember Goldenberg. If you then talk about President Kibaki's time and you ask which scandal you'll remember Anglo-Leasing. If you look at the 7 years of Jubilee and ask which scandal you remember, you'll be spoiled for choice. Because there are too many. And I think it demonstrates the crisis we are in our country. I think over the last 7 years, we've been hiding reality. I think at least the three of us, Patrick, Kwame and myself, have been on this show on different things. And on each of the times, you struggle to speak reality and people hide it. And here are a few realities that we've been hiding. Number one, I think this is not the first time that the statement has been made that money borrowed is been misused. It's been denied and denied vehemently by public entities. The second is that we are borrowing for recurrent expenditure. It's been said over and over again, denied vehemently. The third is that we are overambitious in our projects, denied vehemently. The fourth is that we are living beyond our means, denied vehemently. And the fifth is that we are driven by rent seeking. There are a lot of the borrowing and the expenditure are not so much to kickstart the economy, but for the rent seekers. We want to start this project because I think I will get money out of it. We want to start the other because I think we'll get out of it. And I think our dishonesty is catching up with us as a country. Caught up with that painfully. People knew from around 2 years ago that the government was running broke. And you didn't need big statistics. You just needed to talk to any of your friends in a real public institution. From 2 years ago, any honest public servant who was leading a public institution was having a death sentence. Because you essentially can't pay salaries, you can't meet overheads, but you're not supposed to say anything about it. You're supposed to find some miracle for it to happen. The only people who are happy were those who are dishonest. Because for the dishonest, they don't care whether salaries are paid, they don't care whether there is recurring expenditure, they just care about how much is still in the till for me to take. It doesn't matter what then happens. And I think that's where we are now. And because that's where we are, we need to be brutal in how we deal with it. It is unacceptable, Debarl, that every single day you are speaking about billions lost. And when you think that that is abhorrent, the next billion comes. I am sure tomorrow there will be another billion that is being uncovered. This money doesn't come from the air. This is the money that we borrow. So you don't think that when you borrow some money from Eurobond and it comes into the economy, yes, some 5.6 billion is being allegedly lost on e-citizen. This 5.6 billion is from the same pot. It is not from the air. And once money comes to do something and it is stolen, we are going to face the consequences as a country. And I think that's where we are as a country now.
But look at our neighboring countries, Uganda and Rwanda. They have mega projects just like we have. Not on the same scale, but they're big for that economy. The bypass, the new road from Entebbe to Kampala, which also goes into Munyonyo and so forth, that road, there is a team in the office of the president whose role is to assure the president that that thing makes economic sense, that there's a payback for that road. And they're able to show it in terms of already the portions that have been opened, the flow of traffic, the reduction of time getting into the city and so forth. You can actually attribute a value to that investment in the economy because of the reduction of cost. What can we talk about the SGR in this country? Sasha is going to say it as added cost, right? Where people used to take their own container from the port and bring it straight to the manufacturing facility or to the end thing, there was actually that time had been reduced drastically by efficiencies at the port and also removing all the roadblocks and everything else. So that time was actually the investment in that improvement could actually be seen and quantified. Then you bring in the SGR, which was supposed to make it even better. But you've gone backwards. Who is holding those agencies to account to deliver on the money that was spent? I won't go about into whether it was right or wrong, but we have spent it. Where is the payback? Who is actually monitoring that payback and saying, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do X to make that pay? Go to Rwanda. They built a new conference center, a new convention center in Rwanda. They put hotels, they did everything together. And what has happened? In 2 years already, they've actually becoming a preferred conference destination. And here in Kenya, you're trying to do exactly the same and saying, oh, we've been the preferred conference destination. Rwanda is actually showing a payback on the investment they made on that investment. So here in Kenya, we need to do exactly the same. We need to start holding people accountable. When the project was premised on a certain social payback, payback for the country, somebody has to be held accountable for that. And the SGR1, SGR2A, and the 2B that is now being negotiated, somebody has to actually be told, you are the one who is going to run with this thing and make sure that we can see the benefits. And right now, the SGR people say it was great and everything else, but it is costing this economy a hell of a lot of money. And we have to wake up to that. I would like to see a situation whereby the whole system of having the single window, where you're able to sort of declare your cargo before it arrives and is cleared by government agencies online. It comes off, gets onto a train immediately. The whole train on SGR is pre-cleared. It arrives at the inland container depot in Nairobi. There are 40 trucks waiting. And the minute that train arrives, there's a crane that offloads that truck and within the train. And within an hour and a half, that train is ready to go back. That is success, not what we're seeing now. And somebody has to be held accountable to make that work.
Yeah, so what happened with the, I think previously with Kibaki's regime, we had the efficiency delivery unit that was solely doing what you're saying, you know, to actually hold people account and see the projects that we have, are they really, you know, they've done the cost benefit analysis, and are they really accruing the profits that were desired? I don't know, maybe Goodka, you can tell us, you're the person now in the manufacturing sector, if you're adversely affected by this, even the single window system that we discussed earlier, has it shaken into place? Are we having a seamless flowing, goods from the manufacturers to the retailers, and the hiccups in between being smoothed out?
Okay, let me touch upon several points. The corruption, the borrowing, is having tremendous consequences for the economy as we speak. Spending is down, liquidity is very low in the economy, purchases of consumer products, goods are low, and whilst we appreciate that Treasury cannot do a fiscal stimulus for the economy to increase spend in the economy, it may have to be private sector driven, and we need to try and somehow inject some money into the economy such that the velocity of money flows quickly through the system. We increase our stock turnovers. Right now, people turn over their stock maybe 2, maximum 3 times a year. We need to increase that to 6 times a year. And automatically that spurs consumption, drives growth, increases manufacturing. We see great GDP figures, 5.5%, 6%, and so on. It's all jobless growth. And we now need to have job-driven growth in this economy. In order to do that, we need to fix competitiveness. And to answer Patrick's question on what the SGR has done, the SGR in itself, it's here to stay. We've spent the money. We now have to repay the loans, but it's here to stay. Its job of transporting goods from Mombasa to Nairobi, I think, is being done efficiently. Unfortunately, the issue is the pre-clearance systems before. It's 28 agencies reviewing and inspecting containers in state agencies in Nairobi, 28 agencies, when in reality you only need 4. Kenya Ports Authority, Kenya Railways, Kenya Bureau of Standards, and Kenya Revenue Authority. We've sat with, under CS Masharia's team, there was a technical committee formed. KAM and KEPSA took part in it. I think the deliberations and some of the recommendations that were made, pretty much we have been assured by both CS Masharia as well as CS Matiang'i that they will be adopted and we should start to see some changes. But it's been an extremely painful period for manufacturers because manufacturers have paid the railway development levy of 1.5% consistently since inception to pay for this railway. When on top of that, when you expected actually that the price of transportation as well as the service delivery and that the supply chain would be enhanced, it's not happened. In fact, it's gone into reverse. So actually the cost of transportation from Mombasa to last mile to our factories has actually increased substantially. On top of that, you've actually got the MD of KPA saying you'll be forced to use SGR. I'm sorry, there will probably be a constitutional challenge on this, especially if manufacturers are going to keep on incurring increased costs. We are not willing to pay for more cost. Otherwise, it will again impact competitiveness, it will impact our exports, it will impact job creation, and so on. We need a concerted effort to fix each bottleneck in the system, whether it's the last mile delivery cost, which is probably due to waiting time at ICD and so on. Fix it in a proper manner, and we'll see the results of it come through.
Right. Kwame, on the issue of insolvency, are we likely to face insolvency in the next maybe 5, 10 good years as a country, going with the rate that we can see of the borrowing right now, and we're not able to service these loans, and still we are borrowing? Where do we stand? Because I don't really have the figures, but of course you can give us just a projection of how the state of the economy is as far as insolvency is concerned.
Okay. Well, government figures show that at the end of last year that we owed 5.3 trillion. Total debt is 5.3 trillion. My view is that it's probably much higher than that. I think our debt is closer to 6 trillion now. 6 trillion? Yes, 6 trillion in total. So that's one. The problem with our debt is not just the size, and we keep debating it as if, well, we say it's 60% of GDP, that's not bad. We need it. 75% is what many economists think is
But using the GDP, isn't it the wrong matrix?
It is the wrong matrix, because if the way we should measure it is, or rather, it's one measure, but the one that should concern us the most is if we measure it as a share of our revenues. So right now, if you have 1.4 trillion shillings in revenue, 1.5, definitely 1.6 at the top, and I think that's stretching it. And yet 1 trillion is already marked for revenue, marked for payment of debt. You see, we have 400 billion alone, which can hardly run government for 6 months outside, actually for 4 months outside the debt, outside payment for the debt. So obviously that tells you that there's something really serious. And I think there are all these brave faces coming to the press, again, making you know that, look, our debt is sustainable or not. Based on our numbers today, it is not sustainable. That needs to be stated clearly. It is not. Partly because government has suppliers who supplied services or goods a while back, and they're all waiting, and because they have to wait, they're owed money, and that affects their own cash flows, and some of them borrowed money from banks. You can also see that a lot of projects that were supposed to be carried out have stopped, not just at counties. I know everybody talks about counties, even at national level. The roads that were supposed to be extended and all that, some of them have gone easy, partly because government is already in a cash crunch. The risk that I'm most worried about is our debt also crossed a threshold, I think, in 2017, when our debt, the debt that is owed to foreigners became crossed and exceeded the debt that is owed domestically, which means that about 55% of our total debt is now owed in foreign currency. And the Kenya shilling has been very strong for a long time. It's not going to remain like that forever, irrespective of what you hear. The moment it trips, and the tendency of the Kenya shilling is that it tends to trip by huge amounts all at once when it starts to adjust. If it trips by even 3, 4, 5 percentage points, the bite will be immediate. And that's a risk that's real. Again, we cannot talk up the shilling forever. I think we have good reserves right now in dollars, but if we continue to defend it, it will be inefficient use of that money. If those two things come, and they're almost certain to happen sometime in the future, I think it will become very clear to us that all of us who are being brave right now are already, I think, are just drinking Kool-Aid. But the final point is, the final point is, there's already a crisis. Whether you talk about government payments, if you see the transfer of revenues from the national government collected by the KRA back to the counties, it's been very slow. And it's actually, some counties haven't received money for a while. Of course, some of it is their fault, but even then, if they were ready, all that money is not going. So I don't know if people think that when is the crisis coming? the crisis is already here. Government already has stress based on the amount of money we have to pay for it. And the final one is, when President Kibaki left, I don't think it matters, but let's just say that in 2015, the debt tenure, our debt to GDP was about 47%, 48. The debt tenure was about 28, 29, 31 years. Right now, our debt, while our debt has grown, the tenure has shortened, which means we need to make bigger payments every year. I mean, we'd never paid for the entire period of President Kibaki. For the first time of President Kibaki, we didn't even pay 1 trillion in total in debt servicing. Right now, we are paying 1 trillion in a year for this year. That should tell you something. So whoever it is from the Treasury who's saying we shouldn't be worried, maybe he shouldn't be worried because his life is secured. For the rest of us, we are certainly worried, and it's not just panic. Pushing
so we
panic
have
buttons.
signs that money is not there. We can see also the cash transfer, the stipend for the in the country.
Yeah, it was
up to now. It's been delayed.
Yes,
right. And sooner or later, we're going to hear also maybe the retirement age. We know that this was actually taken to 60. Yeah. Right. They will tell us also now we need to increase that to 65 because how are we going to pay the pension also if there is no money at all? Yeah. So these are telltale signs that truly we are on a slippery slope.
Yes.
Dr.
Gupta said some interesting thing, that manufacturers are not willing to pay any costs. And for me, that's where I would like to start. Kenyans are not willing to pay any more costs. And not just manufacturers, but all segments of Kenyans. And I think the point that he didn't make, which I think is the fundamental reason why he's saying not willing to pay any more costs, is this is not cost of running government. This is cost of inefficiency, and this is cost of fleecing. So that you aren't paying because we are running government. You are paying because some people are taking away 5.6 billion, some people are taking the other. And the solution is tax people more. Every year you're taxing people more, but you tax them what they don't have. The second is, I think the last several years, some of the things that have been making the country run, because this problem is not a problem of now, this is a problem of several years ago. The difference is before then, there were suppliers who were supplying waiting to be paid. Now those suppliers have not been paid for 5 years. Nobody now wants to supply to government. And even those who want can't, because you are incapable of, you supply so that you're paid. But if for 5 years you've supplied 200 million, you haven't been paid and there's no money, increasingly we are in huge trouble. Debarl, I think it is time. I think it's Gupta who made the point that, Treasury is not willing to give an economic stimulus. It is time for us to actually take seriously about two things. It's time for us to take seriously austerity measures, real austerity measures. Because if we don't, we shouldn't wait for the country to be insolvent. We should wait for the consequences of people not being able to pay anymore. That's what's coming, because increasingly people are unable to pay. You've had in public institutions for a long time now, people don't have their taxes paid. For a long time, people don't have their pensions paid. And invariably, it isn't for bad reasons. It's because there's no money. So you pay by paper. I have deducted from Kwame pay, but I don't remit it. What's the consequence of that? That no money is going to KRA. So KRA is increasingly not meeting its target, and you blame it. But they can't collect money from air. They must collect from human beings. So if a businessman delivers services for which he's supposed to pay VAT and is not paid, there cannot be VAT to be remitted. Essentially, it means that even the 1 trillion that we are paying every month, soon we'll find that we are collecting less than 1.4. Soon we'll find that we are collecting less and less, and our expenditure is growing. And it will reach a time where our expenditure is more than what we are collecting. Because the difference of 400 to 600 billion is very little. Especially if we aren't growing the economy, we are shrinking the economy. The reality, as Kwame was telling you, is if you talk to people in the counties, the money has been delayed over the last 2 years. And it's been delayed, I think, not because of inefficiencies. It's been delayed because of creative accounting. That if we delay it by 2 more days, we can collect a little to give you a little here and a little there. That trickery is running its course. And I think reality must now take over. And reality requires us to take austerity measures and also to take stimulus measures. We must look at things critically and ask ourselves. One of the things for me that I think I've raised sometimes in the past, in some instances, we have duplicated civil service. When we introduced the new constitution, the idea was to transfer certain functions to counties and staffing to it. If you look at national government, we still have almost the same numbers, if not more, that we had before devolution. In addition, we have employed at the county level. In addition, we have increased our levels of corruption. Surely, Debarl, that does not require an economist like Kwame. It requires a simple human being to tell you we are in an economic crisis and we need to deal with it as such.
Right. Your parting shots, Patrick Obath?
For me, my parting shot...
Are we in a crisis? Are we in an economic crisis?
I think we are in a crisis as a country. And we have to start... we've committed and we've made all the mistakes of over-investing, taking money out that shouldn't have been taken out of the economy and so forth and so on. And we need to start at a place where we're not spending any more money to grow the economy. That's where you need to start at. Don't spend money to grow the economy. Fix what we have. And these are very simple policy measures. Reducing the size of the government expenditure, reduce the civil service right down to what is necessary to implement policy, not to invest, to implement policy. Bring it right down. Then allow the people who are already working in the economy to work efficiently. Make the tax work well. Don't make the tax become a burden. Let it work well. Thirdly, I think the Big Four agenda is a great agenda, but let's focus on one of them and deliver it. And I will start with agriculture. Get people fed and they'll be healthy, they'll be able to work. And agriculture is a simple fix. Just organize the way we work. You don't need to invest in agriculture. Gallup, whatever it was a great idea. But if you can get people productive in the areas, in the semi-arid areas, in the areas that are already there, that production can then begin to turn into an economic activity. The manufacturers will come in, add value, and you move on.
Right.
Little investment.
Thank you. Sachin Gudka.
I would say actually focus on the manufacturing, obviously, because I have interest in it. Because manufacturing itself is a direct job creator. It creates forex earnings through exports. It creates investment. Secondly, manufacturing also has significant role to play in both agro-processing, in the agriculture or the food security pillar of the Big Four agenda, as well as in affordable housing to create cheap, good quality accessories and from our timber sector, metal sector, cement and building sector to get in and deliver the projects on time. And lastly, even on affordable healthcare, it's us doing pharmaceutical production efficiently and competitively, which will deliver lower pricing to consumers. Right. So that's the core, and that's what we should not lose focus on, but address the competitiveness issues.
Thank you. Kwame.
Well, I think this is one point where you require arms of government to work together with each other. And I think our big debt problem tells you that Parliament needs to step up, because to be honest, most of these expenditure they did approve even when they were told they shouldn't. So the first thing that they need to do is actually ask the national government to cap its spending. You cap spending for at least 3 years and allow growth to buy you time, because raising more taxes is not going to be useful, as you've heard. And businesses, yes, people complain about taxes, but this time we can't tax anymore without affecting, as we could tell from petroleum, VAT on petroleum and all this, we've actually received even less taxes, so showing that it's already affecting consumption. So the first thing is we need to just cap spending and say, look, we're going to hold spending as it is for another 3 years. Then the second thing is we have to go back to the people we owe money and tell them, look, we need to buy time. So you stretch the length of the loan so that you're not spending the entire trillion every year. So if you can reduce that and buy yourself another 200 billion, that's useful to use for other things. Right. But most importantly, I think we need to be rough on people who are stealing public money. Most of them, unfortunately, are in the public service, and they're not at the lower levels. They're at the very top. So they need to be faced off.
Right. Finally, let's hear from Collins.
I think if you're in a hole, Debarl, you must stop digging. And I think the message from all of us must be that government must stop digging. And digging is any of the things they've done over the last 7 years, they must stop. Because those things have put us to where we are. I think for me, the starting point is we have a budget coming up in June. We must see the stopping digging in that budget. We should not be hearing about money is being allocated to new projects. We should actually be seeing how we're reducing spending. That for me what the budget should be. That we reduced this year, we planned this, we are reducing. Lastly, I agree with Patrick that it should be big one. I think the debate as to which of the big one it is the smaller problem. So long as we agree it is one, they can then choose whichever they want, but let it just be one, because that for me will be an aspect of reducing spending as opposed to increasing spending.
Thank you, Collins. We really do appreciate our panelists this morning for the very Intense and insightful discussion we've had this morning. I think we've not really touched on all facets of the economy, but this, of course, is ongoing. We can take this up another time. I really want to thank you for this contribution this morning and also for your valid company this morning. You've been watching In the Market, living invested up.